How's it going, guys? Welcome to the Talk4 Podcast. So excited to have you here today and show you this fantastic episode. Just want to say quickly that episodes like this one and all the ones before and the ones in future are made possible by people who subscribe. Hopefully, just like you. I'm going to ask you today if you can leave a subscribe, leave a follow, leave a rating, leave a like or a comment, and just support the show in the little ways that you can, like that. It makes a huge difference on my end. And quickly, just want to plug as well. I've taken 30 of the best episodes of this podcast and turned them into a fantastic book that goes into 150 secrets to greatness. Each one of those 30 episodes gets crunched down into 5 of the best key takeaways from the whole talk and turns them into a fantastic book. Highly recommend you check it out. Please support the show by grabbing a copy, either a paperback or an ebook. And I can't wait to show you guys this one today. So guys, without further ado, let's get over to the episode. How's it going, guys? Welcome to episode 139 of Talk4, the Quickfire podcast, where we ask 4 great questions to unique and interesting people. Today is no exception. Behind the mic today is your host, Louis Skupien. That's me. Let me introduce our incredible guest for today, Robert Gibbs. Is going to be answering our questions today. So, Robert, how you doing today? And welcome to the show. Super honored to have you here and very humbled.
Well, thank you very much. It's very gracious of you. I'm excited to have this conversation. So really appreciative of the opportunity.
It's going to be great fun and can't wait to dig into it. And I figured the best place to start is just a little introduction then into everything you've got going on, the life of you, really. So we always do the elevator pitch just to kick things off. So kind of 30, 60 seconds roughly, just a little bit about who you are, the day job, and a small intro into the life of you would be fantastic. And then we'll dig into it on the big scale. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, so thanks. So who am I? I am the retired associate administrator for mission support for NASA. I held that role for the last 5 years. Prior to that, I was the chief human capital officer, the people person at NASA, had a similar role at Department of Energy. And prior to that, I was a naval officer, retired after 21 years in the United States Navy. So that's the thumbnail sketch of where I've been and what I'm doing.
It's pretty good. So let's get into it on the big scale then. So I love to hear people's
Sure.
backstories. I think that's where the best kind of things that can inspire youth almost are sometimes, where it's in the background of people then. So you've had an
Yeah.
incredible career, leadership roles at NASA, Department of Energy, US Navy. Can you walk us through that journey a bit then? So starting from your early days in the Navy to the role at NASA, basically, what were some of those kind of big moments that got you into all of it? And just talk to me a little bit about that career path
Yeah.
then.
I was once told by one of my great bosses that your career is not a linear line. It's not a line. It's never that. It has starts and turns and all sorts of things. And I think that's absolutely the best description of my career. So I started off, I joined the Navy as an enlisted nuclear machinist mate. I spent 9 years doing that prior to receiving my commission. I worked mostly in nuclear power, ran a nuclear repair shop. I was on board 4 different submarines. I spent 7 years at sea. And then I was commissioned and went to work for Naval Reactors. We build the nuclear reactors for aircraft carriers and submarines. It's a Navy 4-star command centered here in Washington, D.C. That was a great opportunity to serve my country in a different way. I'll just, be honest. I preferred being more going to sea than sitting in Washington, D.C. But, I really believe, and I think it's probably one of my core beliefs that you have to contribute to something that has meaning and value. Probably it's more important for a lot of folks that I know. It's more important than compensation money or other things. It's, hey, how can we make a difference? How can we do those things? So that's where my career started. I got into the people business. I had a great boss who called me in the office one day and said, "Hey, I really want you to run the people business." And I said, "I have no interest in this. I don't even like people that much, to be honest." And kind of looked down at me and said, "There's no RSVP at the bottom of this invitation. Get out of my office. Go do your job there, Lieutenant Commander." So it was a great opportunity. It was a new journey for me. And what I found that I really, really enjoyed working in people business and finding ways to make them successful, regardless of where you're working or what you're doing. People are kind of the secret ingredient, and that's held true throughout my entire career. So I thought that was really important. So from there, I had an opportunity to go to the Department of Energy. and serve as their chief human capital officer, head people person, and a really diverse and incredible mission, over 100,000 contractors and federal employees situated across the country doing incredible and diverse things, everything from nuclear nonproliferation to nuclear weapons sort of stewardship. So it's as wide of an array of gamut of things you could possibly imagine doing as you could imagine. From there, I got an opportunity to go to NASA as their chief human capital officer. It was, one of those opportunities. In fact, I was leaving the government to go to the private sector, and NASA came calling and asked me to lead some transformation efforts. And you don't say no to that job, right? You don't say no to working at NASA. It's a very hard thing to do. And it was an incredible 9 years or so that I was there, for 4 years as the chief human capital officer, and then 5 years as the associate administrator, mission support director. So that's sort of the background of how I got to where I am.
Fantastic. I mean, it's a pretty interesting career, and you can see how that career path has led to doing what you did there at NASA and why they would be after someone like you with your skills and that experience and stuff. And I'd love to dig into exactly what that kind of looked like then. So obviously associate administrator for mission support at NASA, overseeing a 4 billion line of business and 12,000 employees. So I guess looking at some of that experience there and the things that you got to do and the way you implemented them, how did you manage such a massive operation? What strategies did you kind of learn in the Navy side of things? Then the Department of Energy that you then took from there and then kind of applied into the organization there that really helped out. So yeah, just some of those key
Yeah.
things that helped in such a large and complex organization, I guess, would be fantastic.
It's funny, I look back on it, and it was a lot, but the reality is it's a very matrixed organization. And really, my job was to help leadership in all of these 26 different lines of business to be successful. At the end of the day, mission support directorate, mission support itself is about enabling the mission. That's our only reason for being at NASA. Was that entire mission directorate was, what can we do to enable the mission, whether it's cutting edge science or exploration or technology or aeronautics, whatever it is. We had to find a way to combine all the aspects of mission support to make sure that we we're doing all of the things necessary to pull off the mission. So the main focus on that was really kind of three principal areas and a lot of things that all tied together. The principal areas were people, technology, and infrastructure were the sort of three biggest challenges that we were facing. But here's the great thing, and this is the secret sauce of NASA. It's the people. It's all about the people. It's almost unnerving when you first get there that people are so nice and so willing to throw into difficult problems and to help pull on the rope and get to the right solution. NASA is known for excellence. It's probably the most competitive position in the world. Certainly astronauts are. Um, but that excellence goes across the board. You see excellence in everything that we do and everything that was done. And that obviously complies or applies to mission support as well. We'd get, unbelievable talent in technology and IT and accountants and lawyers and all the way across the gamut. So that's, was kind of the sort of the backdrop of what that organization was. For me, I think the focus on the mission, that is how you get everyone going in the same direction, is to establish, okay, my job is to help remove, barriers and provide resources, but we're all focused on the mission, what we can contribute to it. NASA's been the best place to work in the US, the federal government, for the last 13 years. And just 2 nights ago, they announced that, or 3 nights ago, maybe. So for the 13th year in a row, NASA has been that top spot of the agency. And it's built on the premise that, the employees truly care about the mission and the leadership cares about its employees. And I could give you 1,000 examples of how all that sort of plays out.
That would be great. How about a couple of them then? So, I mean, like you said, I'm sure you have 1,000 of them, but it would be great to get an idea of maybe some
Yeah,
of those stories or some of those experiences you had that really defined just how great it is at
sure.
NASA, and also some of the things that maybe you saw that you wanted to implement there, and how that was, how you took charge there, implemented this, and how it affected the culture there as well.
Yeah, so I would tell you, for me, I'll give you some clear demonstrations of it. During COVID here in the United States, it was very difficult to get information. It was really hard to make sure that, employees and everyone involved with what we do and how we do it was involved and had information to make decisions on it. NASA almost overnight switched to a sort of remote working footprint where possible. A lot of NASA, what we do can't be done remotely. So, I think that was absolutely critical and key. We never shut down. We never, not for a day, not for an hour, not for a minute. The agency kept working. It was really interesting that, we would establish things. In fact, we would make sure that our employees had access to information. Our leaders were checking in with their employees, and employees were making sure they had avenues to get resources if they needed them. And that was no light lift by leadership. That was a lot of very long days for a long period of time to make sure we built a support structure that took care of our folks. At the time, the administrator at the time made it very, very clear, our job is to take care of the people. The people will take care of the mission. So let's do everything we possibly can. And I'll tell you this, I have never experienced pushback trying to solve a problem for an employee from their boss or from anyone else. What I've experienced is nothing short of remarkable in that they would go the extra mile to make sure their folks were taken care of. So I think that's one way in that it's different. It would have been much easier just to say, well, just listen to whatever the news, the administration puts out and you figure it out. That would have been much easier. But, there were very long discussions amongst leadership and making sure the resources were put forward. I think that was certainly one. Another one that I think, and we're dealing with it right now, Crew 10 launches tomorrow, actually. That NASA is dealing. I gotta stop saying we because I'm retired from NASA. That the safety of mission comes first. We make very hard decisions when you postpone a launch, even though it's probably on the margins and you probably could do it. But if there's any implication on safety, it is absolutely it absolutely comes to the forbearance, right? It is what is the driver of the decision. If there's any question or implication of safety, the launch doesn't go. And that's seen throughout, right? I mean, that is the absolute sort of driver of some of the culture of the agency is, constructive dissent. That anyone at any level can say, hey, I'm not sure we're doing this right. Let's have that conversation. And not only is that culture sort of adhered to, it's actually encouraged. It's something it's in the fiber of what we do and how we do it. And that's probably another great example of what they mean with taking care of the people.
Definitely. So you've obviously led in both the military and the civilian environment. So you went from the military, then you did work in NASA and stuff. It makes me wonder, in a place like NASA, what were some of those key principles really that you saw that were kind of, I guess, remaining the same across both of those environments? And I'd like to dig into that a bit because I want people in their organizations who are listening in today to maybe pick up a few pointers or a few things that they can apply that might benefit from both, two very, very high performance places like the military and somewhere like NASA. So what are the parallels there and how can we start to apply?
Yeah, we're going through a period of a lot of transition, a lot of change here in the States. So as the administrations change, mission changes, priorities change. But I rely back on a statement made by one of the Office of Management and Budget Directors that said the right thing for the right reasons has no party affiliation. If you're working on the right things, you're doing it, and you can demonstrate it, it'll survive from one administration to the next. And I found that to always be true. There's certainly some new challenges being posed given the financial condition the United States is in. But I really believe that is a core principle. When I'm asked, so hey, tell me how we can get ourselves focused and aligned. I think the first thing you have to do is truly, truly, truly know the mission and know your business line, right? So when I've briefed Congress or the administration or stakeholders, tribal nations, foreign governments, whatever it might be, you have to know the mission that you are trying to accomplish forward, back, and sideways. And you have to know all of the components that build up to that. It's an easy thing to say, but if you think about it, you're solving the problem from the end. And that is regardless of what the change or adversity it is, whether it's driven by markets, regulations, changing costs, structure, partnerships, whatever the driver of change, that's almost irrelevant if you understand how you're going to react and accomplish that change and still successfully accomplish the mission. So I would argue that architecting from the right, from the solution, and making sure you have a foundation by which to make those decisions, absolutely critical as you're going through sort of some of these adverse times. Another thing I would absolutely require, organizations must require today and going forward is agility. And, so we're on a common definition here. I think agility is the ability to leverage opportunities, respond to threats at a certain speed. Can your organization do those things? That's absolutely crucial and critical to accomplish the mission. Do you have the agility to do that? And I think that's built on some of the premises that NASA is really good at, which is innovation and engagement. Are your folks engaged? Do you give them the space? Does leadership give them the space to be innovative, to find better solutions, to do those sorts of things that push the boundaries of where you're going and what you're doing next?
Definitely. That's a really good bit of advice right there. I seriously, seriously think people are going to benefit for that. And I think another way of looking at it too, just beyond the organization and the things that the organization are doing and the way that it's being applied and the culture and stuff, is also like the self work too, like your own leadership and things like that. Then, so I guess with the experience you've had, senior advisor at NASA, very distinguished career in government service. How do you sort of approach leadership in a really high stakes environment? And what do you think some of the kind of crucial elements or key points is really of great leadership or great leaders in general in organizations like NASA and then far beyond too?
Yeah, I think in order to lead an organization, whether it's complex, complicated, or fairly straightforward, you have to have sort of core competencies. First is communication. Bob Cabana, former associate administrator of the agency, astronaut, shuttle commander, test pilot, basically your standard version of an American hero, said that every problem he's ever encountered at its root cause has some communication problem in it. So I think you have to be able to communicate up and down the sort of chain of command. You have to do so with clarity and candor. You have to be honest. The folks you work with, they're smart, and it doesn't matter where you work. The people are very, very smart, and they'll know when you're not giving them the authentic sort of true story. But don't be afraid as a leader, and this is advice I give often, is to admit when you don't know something. As a leader, be authentic, be true, saying, I'm not sure, but we're going to figure it out together. And to involve your folks to get their best thinking. I adhered to a principle called best idea wins. Didn't matter where it came from, but if you wanted to participate in a transformation process, you had to be willing to accept that you may not have the best answer. And sometimes for leaders, that's difficult. And from my perspective, I think it's critical to be able to say, we're going the right direction here, but maybe we could do something a little bit better. And to hear that, when I was transforming the human capital enterprise at NASA, we were going one direction. And then someone who was very junior came up and said, boy, couldn't we do it this way? And they gave us an alternative that ended up being the path we followed. And it was pretty remarkable, and it was well thought out and well reasoned. But it showed how that sort of principle, adhering to best idea wins, allows you to, really, really adapt as you learn and to change and to put forward the best answer possible. Another principle, and this is probably a little more controversial, is stop doing stupid. And I've said this many a time, so many times it's not the black letter law that gets you in trouble. That's not the thing that's really confining what you're doing. It's how you implement that law, rule, regulation. And it sounds a little brash, a little harsh perhaps, but from my perspective, if you can stop doing stupid, you'll end a lot of unforced errors and make whatever you're working on go a little bit better. I think it's absolutely non-negotiable that you think in those terms as a leader. So that's just a couple of very simple principles.
Yeah, I really like that. I'd like to just ask one more question on that then too. So
Sure.
if we talk about empowering young leaders and stuff and young people in organizations to not only speak up but present ideas and empower them to be able to do that and have an organization that allows that to be heard and not just kind of laughed off almost. How do you sort of balance that with the second part of what you said there too, where you don't want to be flooded with a load of bad ideas or a load of stupid? So how do you kind of empower the younger guys to speak up, give their ideas and present really great stuff without being overloaded with a load of, inexperienced ideas, basically, I
Yeah.
guess?
Yeah, so I would put it this way. Stupid ideas are encouraged, right? People can come in, but they have to do the homework, right? They have to know what we're talking about. They have to have done the homework to offer a suggestion, an alternative, or whatever it might be. If you're willing to do that and think it through and have conversations and vet it before it comes up, you know what? Let's have that conversation. It may be in some people's minds stupid, but you know what? I can't tell you how many times that those ideas that someone may see as stupid, you know, actually sort of morph into something that's very important or very tangible or very meaningful. So yeah, when I'm talking about stop doing stupid, I said let's just not do the things to ourselves. Let's not, if it requires six, let's not go to 10, if it requires six, sort of a thing, let's make sure that we're working together and we're putting the effort in the right place. Because it's been a while that mission support, the organization I was responsible for, was very resource constrained. It may have been a $4 billion organization, but it had 5 billion in requirements. So, you had to make very, very difficult decisions as working with the entire leadership, sort of team as you went forward. So I think all of those things play. I think they're all sort of come into being there as you're going through the process.
Definitely makes total sense to me. You've done some other exciting stuff too. So looking at obviously the career you've had and things that you've done and things that you'd like to highlight as well. But you've briefed the president, you've briefed cabinet members, Congress on issues of national
Yeah.
importance. I think that's huge, and I think there's lots to be learned from being not only in a position of trust to be able to do that, but also the lessons you learned while doing it and
Yeah.
going into it. So I guess first of all, what's it like being on the forefront of these high level discussions, and how do you sort of approach them, prepare for them, deal with them, and what's it kind of like in ensuring everything that you're doing there on the ground aligns with national policy and the priorities there?
Yeah, I'd be lying to you if said it wasn't an anxious moment, right? It certainly is. Get an opportunity to brief the president and his team on some on personnel reform inside the U.S. government. Had an opportunity to brief Congress on infrastructure at NASA and also the return to work principles and policies coming out of COVID. And sort of sustainability and some of the climate and other things that we have done. Um, for me, I think there's definitely some principles when you're doing those things, if you're briefing your shareholders, stakeholders, or employees, is to really kind of walk through and make sure that you understand the message that you have, drafted, the message you're trying to relay is written for that audience. Very often I see a singular message written for all audiences, and I'll tell you that's another communication principle is, boy, if it isn't playing with your audience, I think you have to take another moment, another opportunity to sort of sit down and explain, what's really going on here and redraft the message. And if you can't explain it in the elevator speech, right? If you can't explain the principles of what you're trying to convey and why you're trying to convey it, in 30 seconds, then I think you need to take another opportunity to sit down and continue refining your thought, refining how you're going to communicate. I think that's, somewhat critical as you're kind of going forward. Um, you know, the message of what's important is good. Knowing why it's important is probably better. This is an opportunity, and an opportunity in all sorts of transformation and change is to refocus on the why are we doing things. From there, you can really get into the what's in the hows and sort of evaluation of alternatives and all of those things. But if you don't know the why, if you don't know it forward and backwards, if it doesn't ring true, then I'm not sure you're gonna be able to communicate as effectively as you would hope, regardless of what the level of the interaction is. So that's just my thought on it.
I agree. I've found that in here sometimes too, doing podcast episodes, it's where you understand the subject matter better. You can have those better conversations and really open out into, really understanding what's going on exactly. Because, I think that's definitely it. The more, confident you are in what you're talking about, and the more you know about it, the more you're going to be able to kind of be passionate about it and have that conversation and be super into it and really understand every element of what's being said. So I totally agree there. And I like what you said there too. Definitely, I think that's the same in business pitches, right? If you can't kind of explain it to a baby or a kid or something in simple terms in 30 seconds, then you probably don't really understand what you're doing well enough. Would you agree with that?
100%. I mean, I came into the Department of Energy from Navy, and we were working on sort of the federal employee viewpoint survey and some other things, and trying to really understand where our workforce was. And we were writing these messages that said we want to be a high performing culture and all these other things. And it really struck home with me when an employee says, I'm not even sure what they're talking about. If the people you're writing to don't even understand the context of the conversation, then maybe there's an opportunity to maybe do it better. The days of a singular email, just fire it and forget it, and then continue and move on with your daily business. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's effective communication in my mind. You got to find a way to communicate in a way that's authentic and real. I met with every member of the human capital community at NASA when I was first in that job. And I took the time to go to all 10 centers and sat down and I said, I will have an honest conversation with you. I'll answer any question you have. But the price of admission for this conversation is will you be honest with me as well? And that was sort of the beginning of how you build trust and sort of a foundation and have those conversations that have meaning and substance. But you got to be invested, you got to be willing to show that, hey, I am here to help and let's talk about these things.
Absolutely. Any other big misses that you see pretty commonly within general commerce, businesses, and organizations and stuff that you've learned along the way? I mean, talking about that right there, I completely agree. And I think, often it comes down to the leadership and the CEO or the boss or the manager and stuff who tend to
Yeah.
squash all these things very early on. But I don't know, any kind of big misses and very common mistakes you're seeing there aside from what you just spoke about?
Yeah. Yeah, when you're looking at transformation or change, there's a common understanding that you have to have. First principle, it's not easy. It's very hard. You're asking folks to move from their very comfortable, safe position usually to something else. So there's a lot of risk with that. So it's certainly not for the faint of heart or half committed. It is an absolute, um, all in sort of proposition if you're trying to make major substantive change. And that is something I've certainly underestimated, as I was going through this process that, it's, hey, people don't like change for lots of reasons, and you're asking them to do it. And that builds into maybe the second principle. The second principle being, while change or transformation be an organizational priority, it happens at an individual basis. Every person, kind of brings it on board or doesn't bring it on board at a different sort of pace, a different level of understanding. And you've got to go in with that understanding that whatever your communication priorities are, they've got to get to the person on an individual basis. And you have to be willing to accept that, give space for that, reiterate communications, provide safe space for conversations, all of those things that I think are, pretty important. Maybe the third principle that I've seen is most common mistake is that, when you're looking at these, I don't know, maybe that's the best way to put it. When you're looking at these opportunities, you have to know. You have to know inside and out. You have to know forward and back. You've got to build that knowledge, whether it's every cost that's associated with it. You have to benchmark those things, examine other opportunities, go through an analysis of alternatives. You got to go through all of those things as you're going through the process. And the leader has to be intimately involved with it. You cannot just sign this to a team and hope for the best. You have to roll up your sleeves and be intimately involved with the transformation efforts if you're really looking for it to succeed. And that requires you, to do things in developing supporters and peers and leadership and resources and all of those things. But yeah, it's really absolute knowledge of what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it and where you are today.
Absolutely. I mean, all I'm seeing in you is just a bucket load of incredible knowledge and experience from doing all of this. And it begs the question then, so you're out of NASA now. How do you kind of see yourself applying all of this into the future? Anything you can reveal there with future jobs? I mean, I guess it's pretty hard to top NASA,
Yeah.
but yeah, how are you going to do that?
Yeah, it is. And it's, yeah, I get this question a lot. Why did you leave that great job? 5 years in that role is longer than anyone had served in that role previously. And I think it was time for a different voice from leadership, right? After a while, you need a different voice to do things differently, to approach things differently, to see things differently. So I'm working with some startups right now, trying to help them and see them be successful. So I have a small consulting practice that I'm working on things on a limited basis where I can help. A lot of work in transformation, a lot of work in helping companies look at problems differently. If I have a skill set that I can apply to other places, it's solving hard problems. Whether it was environmental issues at NASA or the infrastructure issues at NASA or the people issues at NASA, same at energy and different things in the Navy, but kind of all along the same principles. It's solving hard problems. So it's doing those things. And I am super excited about it. It's a lot of fun, to kind of dig into completely different fields. I mean, I am as far away in some of these things from NASA as you could possibly get. But man, is it exciting. And I'm super enjoying my time.
Absolutely. I can completely see that. I completely agree. And let's look back on it then. So I know people love stories and stuff. And I think some of the best responses and best clips and things that come out with from the show have just been these like funny stories and things that have happened and everything. So I got to ask you, so yeah, 5 years in that role is a pretty long time.
Yeah.
Any near miss disasters, any very proud moments, any funny stories, or anything from that career and that 5 years in NASA that you think is just hilarious and a bit cheeky to share,
Yeah.
maybe?
It's really interesting. I got to do a lot of outreach on behalf of the agency, right? Under the sort of understanding that one of the roles of the agency is inspiration for all, for the benefit of all, kind of a thing. So I did a lot of international discussions and conversations and the rest of it. I was in Brazil, and I don't know if it was lost in translation, but I think people thought I was an astronaut. I am not an astronaut, not even close, not in a million years, right? In fact, my son, when he was 8 and heard I was going to NASA, kind of gave me the, "Are you an astronaut?" And I said, "No." Kind of walked away and went, "Huh." It was a great disappointment for him. Anyway, I was in Brazil and having these conversations, and people wanted to take their picture with me. I'm like, "Not an astronaut. I am not an astronaut." But yet, it was just the brand of the agency that's known internationally. And it was one of those moments where it was pretty funny at the time. But I look back on it and kind of say, well, isn't that interesting that there is such, a recognition of that brand and what it means? I had a woman yelling at me at an airport when we were talking about NASA. And I said, well, there's bureaucracy at NASA too. And she was absolutely astounded. She said, there can't be bureaucracy at NASA. I'm like, well, there is. I mean, it's an organization, it's an agency. And she literally started yelling at me and saying, you have to solve hard problems. Your agency has to do these incredible things and solve the impossible, get rid of your bureaucracy. And I said, well, thank you. I thank you for the help. But yeah, it's great opportunities. It's things that I have truly enjoyed. And when I look back on it, it was all about the people. That's what made it all special and different.
That's great. What are you most proud of there? I mean, like you said, 5 years there. It's a pretty good career. That's like you said, the longest ever there in that role. So you clearly did a great job. There must be a lot of stuff you're proud of, but it makes you wonder, what do you kind of hope that your legacy that you left behind there for the next person was, and how do you kind of
Yeah.
see on the large scale that you impacted operations and day-to-day stuff there?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'm probably proud of in that role was the focus on mission, right? Reminding ourselves that mission support's only real job is to support the mission, and that's how we have to think of all things. And that was a bit of a sort of directional change from where they were to where we were when I left. In infrastructure, we, solved some long-lasting, really expensive environmental issues that protected the environment, protected the community, and did so in a way that made sense, not only for NASA, but for the states or the tribal nations or others that we were dealing with. Very proud of the work that was done in that group. We also developed the agency's first agency master plan. NASA has 55 billion in infrastructure, but to come up with a plan saying, here's what we need today, here's what we don't need, and here's where we're going in the future. That was huge. That was a huge effort and a multi-year effort of making that happen. And it was based because we have great people that work in that line of business. And then lastly, I would say taking care of the people. If you take care of the people, they'll take care of the mission. We worked on compensation, development, training, education, all these very critical things so that we maintained that incredible resource that made this agency go. So, yeah.
Yeah. Were there any moments in all of that where you saw it all come together and just kind of looked at it all and just thought, wow, what I've done here has made an impact? I mean, I remember a great conversation I had with Justin Astro Elliott. So he was the Thunderbird one, but he was actually in the run in the finals for NASA and took the assignment of Thunderbird one and ultimately withdrew. But we were speaking about how he turned that team around and how that team was failing essentially, and then it took a whole cultural shift to get the
Yeah.
Thunderbirds to where they are today again. And he spoke about this one moment where they were at I think it was a dinner party after a show, and just saw how they all gelled together, these people, and how just fantastic the culture was that they'd built and stuff like that. And I just wonder, in those 5 years at NASA, was there ever a moment where you just looked and took a step back and thought, yeah, like we've done great work here. These are the best people in the world. Any moments like that?
Yeah, I think at first that's a great framing. I think that's a great way to kind of look at it and say, hey, did you have that singular moment? I had several of those. I would say, when I watched where we were with infrastructure, we're not an enterprise-based modeled system in mission support prior to, right? And now they're talking about moving things differently and all the rest of it, and that's great. But what we had to move to was something that was not 10 different stovepipes where everyone did each of own of everything. So we were able to work across all of these boundaries. And, about 2 years ago, we're at a leadership discussion, and it just happened organically. People were solving problems across the boundaries that would never have happened prior to that. And they were solving big and difficult problems and doing so at a speed that they had never been able to achieve previously. So at that moment, I said, "Wow, that's impact. That's impact right there." When we sort of did a sort of reprocessing or fixing the process of astronaut hiring to make sure that folks were compensated fairly for what we were asking them to do, for the most competitive job in the world. I thought that was cool. That was a very big moment. And sort of developing a talent marketplace where people could put in to work on their passion on a detailed basis, was one of those things that we did that really kind of invigorated the workforce. So there's just a couple of examples,
Yeah.
that I found to be really meaningful in my career.
That's really great. And then tying all of this back to a question I tend to ask at the end of most podcasts now when I remember to. It's a bit of a new show tradition more than anything, but tying all of that back and everything you've seen, everything you've done, and everything that you're going to do, if you had kind of a moment or a couple of minutes to whisper in the ear of a really young you, like maybe 11, 12, 13, just to, that back to the
I
future
love this
moment
question.
of, what would you say to a bit of a young you, in terms of what to expect going forward, some of those key life principles, just that minute of, like the elevator pitch at the start, what would be your message to a young you at this stage?
Yeah, that's I love this question, by the way, and I get the opportunity to speak to college students and others fairly frequently. The first piece of advice I'd give them is take hard jobs and do them well. That is the greatest development opportunity. You're demonstrating to whatever the leadership is and yourself, probably more importantly, that you can do the hardest of things and you can do it well. I think that's absolutely critical. The second piece of advice, question why. Never be afraid to question why you're doing something and can you do it better. That sort of inquisitive sort of attitude towards problems will serve you well throughout the rest of your life. And probably the third piece of advice is just know your job, you know, spend the time necessary to really know your job and never be afraid to demonstrate that you know your job.
Yeah.
So those are the three things that I think and that applies from Navy to energy to NASA kind of universally.
I love it. That's a great place to round it off, I think. That's been the 4 questions for today. It's been an honor, and just want to get you to have a bit of a shameless plug then. So we always have that at the end, and I'd love to just give you a few minutes really to just promote anything that you're working on, you want people to take a look at, or just the things that you believe in. That could be the secret knowledge book that you have that you read when you were a bit younger and that was amazing, or a bit of social media website, or any of those new ventures that you're working on right now. So yeah, anything there?
Yeah, so this is what I do with these opportunities to speak to folks. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I respond to my LinkedIn. So that's how we came into contact.
Sure is.
I always offer the opportunity. Yeah, I always offer the opportunity, especially for folks as they're starting out, to have that sort of conversation to help them on their journey. But yeah, it's Robert Gibbs at LinkedIn, and you can find me. I'm fairly easy to find. So please, if anyone has questions or comments, reach out. Let's talk.
That's great. Robert, thank you so much for having me, for me having you on the show for Talk4 today. This was absolutely incredible, a real honor, and
Yeah.
a true pleasure. Thank you for this. It was great.
Thank you. Love the format and love the conversation. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I really appreciate you. And all the links to all that's going to be in the description. Do reach out. He's a great guy and super communicative. As you can see, he's on the podcast right now and we had a great talk. So guys, this was episode 139. If you'd like to listen to the past episodes, go and have a look at the channel. If you'd like to listen in for the future ones too, make sure to hit the subscribe button and spread some love by leaving a like and a comment. Signing off for now. See you in the next one. Cheers.